am so stoked to have my next guest join us. His debut EP is called Where the Redwoods Meet the Sea. It is Windsor, who I know as Geordie Tough. Sir,
Nice to be back.
so good to see you. And I wish we
Yeah,
were doing this in person.
I know. I know the last time uh, Pete interviewed my high school band. Um,
Fox
so
Jaguars.
that was a while ago. Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's nice to be back on your show because I just, I had a fond memory of that day. Because we played live in studio on your show way back when I was a teenager. But yeah, it's nice to just be on the show anyway.
I
Um,
appreciate it, man. And I got to tell you, vividly remember that day of how excited you were, how your buddies were to be just playing in front of cameras and everything like that. And you were like,
yeah.
is this good for you? Do you want me to do it again? You were very particular to make sure that you wanted to get it right and that you looked good. And I was like so stoked. And at the time, I was working for the local alternative station in San Francisco, and I was hyped on you guys. Box Jaguars. It sounds like a great name. It's garage rock, and at the time, Arctic Monkeys was out, White Stripes were at their peak, and all these bands were doing similar music, and you were inspired by them. And I was like, this guy's got something. This kid's got something.
Yeah, that was the beginning of my journey for sure.
Yeah, and we obviously lost touch since then. I've been keeping track every now and then, and um, gosh, when you look back at those beginnings, it is kind of full circle because now this new project goes back to your roots. But
Yeah.
but when we're talking about those memories and that particular moment in time when you were in high school with that band with your friends, did you imagine that this would be where you would be 15 years later or 12 years later, how many years it's
I mean,
been?
I no, no. Um, I think when you're in a band, like it's tunnel vision, you just that is it. Like that is my destiny. Um, and I think like people over the years told me that like that I was a writer, that I was a songwriter and you know that I had a unique approach to telling stories. So, but I always just assumed because I came from band world that I had to be in a band. And during the pandemic, my band after my high school band Mainland broke up. Um, and so I like was so unsure of what to do. Um, because I didn't have anyone to play with and I was sort of just like forced to go solo, really. Um, and I just had my recording setup that I brought back up to the Bay Area and made this record that's out now. And I didn't want to tell the story of the pandemic. I wanted to like find something new to tap into that I'd never talked about before. So it felt very natural being back in Northern California to talk about my childhood, my youth.
This project is so befitting because you went through a lot of personal issues. You lost your dad in your early 20s, and I'm sure it made such an impact on you. And what's really interesting is the relationship between you and your dad was such a strong bond, and that you hold these memories that you cherish, that you have been able to convey in some of these songs, especially in the last song, Drift Away. How would you describe your relationship with your dad?
Oh, we were just really close, like he he worked in San Jose as a school principal, so he would have the summers off and we would take trips together every summer, and I didn't see him every day because he was working a lot and he was like a career guy and very practical. Um, but every summer we would go to like Mexico and he was bilingual and so we would go to Latin America a lot and travel together and he like helped me save up money for my first guitar, and during that time where I was writing the EP, I was I was thinking about him a lot, and I think everyone during like the last 2 years in isolation or not was kind of re like visiting where they thought their life should be or where they want their life to go. And, I think I just thought about my dad a lot and what he would think and, what he would say. And yeah, I had a lot of unresolved grief around it. So making that song was like a way to process it even better and come to peace with it.
This is something that you are releasing years after he had passed. When that had occurred, you were in the band. Do you Were you trying to shield, or how were you processing the songwriting process for the band at that point in time? Or
I don't think I was old enough to really to really process what had happened. Like I don't think I had developed enough of a self-awareness, right? I think at 22, if something really bad happens to you, I mean, in my circumstance, I was just shoving down how I actually felt about it, and I didn't even realize it until years later that I had just like pushed how it made me feel aside for so long. So, yeah, I think as you just get older, you just like hopefully you learn more self-awareness and like how to process things in a better way. And yeah, in the band I just totally there were years where I think like I would get frustrated at certain things or upset, and I think it was maybe just like a result of me pushing down how I felt about like losing my dad or other things that were bothering me at the time. So I'm trying not to do that anymore. But yeah, for so long I had just not come to terms with it or processed how it actually made me feel.
do you think you also got some of that wanderlust from him as well? You're moving away to New York City, and
Yeah, well, my dad was like a New Yorker too. So I felt when I moved there, I was following in his footsteps a little bit. Um, he was like born in New York City. So, and I just had such a respect for like the music that came out of New York in like the 60s and 70s and 80s. And that like I wanted to have a chapter of my life where I lived there. It felt good. It was like a rebellion, to leave and go that far, right? Because a lot of my high school friends, they would move to San Francisco and go to college up there, or move to Portland. A couple of my friends like moved to Southern California, but a lot of them stayed in the Bay Area. And so me moving to New York, I think I was like one of the only there was one other girl that went to New York for school but there weren't many people kind of like they stayed close and I just was like I need to experience something completely different. I need to like challenge myself. And I lived there for about 7 years before I moved to LA. And yeah, it was interesting. I mean, I
was it
think when I moved
something
there,
was it something that you had planned, like right after high school you were like, all right, I'm out of here?
yeah, I mean, I remember hearing well, I vividly remember hearing the Velvet Underground and Nico record and being like, this is the most New York thing I've ever heard. Like, I want to make music like this. I was like, I heard that album and it changed me. I had this moment as a teenager where I was just like, I want to make music like Lou Reed. Like, I want to live these stories he's telling and experience what like downtown New York feels like. And so that was like a moment in time too where I was like so captivated. And I went there and it was really exciting time to live in New York, like 2010, 2000. I mean, my first week in New York, a friend invited me. We went to see Grizzly Bear and Beach House were playing for free in
Wow.
Brooklyn. And I went down to the waterfront in Williamsburg and I watched those bands play. and it was just so captivating. The sun was setting over Manhattan, and I'm like, this is my life now. Like, this is amazing. And there were all these DIY spaces and, underground music venues and shows. And like New York had like so much going on at that time. But it kind of dwindled when it got really expensive, to live there. And that's when I left too. And um, now I live in LA and LA feels right.
Like I mentioned earlier, it's full circle moment to hear these songs talking about your youth. I met you when you were in your youth,
Yeah,
and to see you
pretty
now,
cool.
as to see you now in your 30s and a man, is it's been so great to catch up with you. And I wish we had kept touch. Obviously things happen and so forth, but when you're back up in the Bay, please let's link up.
We'll connect. Yeah.
And
Well, I think some tour dates are in the works, so I'll be up there soon.
awesome, great catching up with you.
You too, Pete.